Well, happy Monday. A lot to tackle here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, editor at the Center Square, Illinois, where you can check out the latest headlines from not just Illinois, but across the country. Again, go to thecentersquare.com and you'll see it all. Free, no paywall. All you got to do is just go to the website. You can also get the newsletter. You just click on newsletter and subscribe and get headlines in your inbox each morning. What we're going to be tackling today with Illinois in Focus, we've got the governor enacting the physician-assisted suicide bill. He also signed other laws on Friday, so we'll hear about those and give you an update on what's going on there. Plus, we've got to give you an update on some of the laws taking effect January 1st in Illinois, including the safe gun storage provision. So we'll tackle some of that with U.S. Law Shield's Kirk Evans. Chatted with him late last week about that. So those are the things we're going to be tackling. Also, a little bit later on in the live program here, as we are live each and every weekday morning, the U.S. Supreme Court could announce whether or not that Cook County gun ban challenge would be accepted by the U.S. Supreme Court, to where they could determine the outcome of that. And that's the Viramontes case out of Cook County. They had a conference on Friday, and 8:30 our time, so about 20 minutes from now, the order list will be updated, and we'll see what happens there live. But of course, a lot of you, especially in the chat room, are probably also going to be refreshing the U.S. Supreme Court website at about 8:30 our time to keep updated on what's going on with the order list and the Viramontes case in particular. So we'll be doing that here live as well. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. With you each and every weekday morning, I'm Greg Bishop. So real quick, though, before we do get into some of the other things we're talking about, what we're going to be covering today, Governor J.B. Pritzker will be in Springfield addressing homelessness. So he has a news availability. He'll be available to take off-topic questions as well later on. He is also recognizing Hanukkah at the governor's mansion. So there's no media availability after that, so we'll have a chance to ask the governor questions at just one of his two events in Springfield today. So that's happening a little bit later on this afternoon. Also, the Freedom Caucus will be in Springfield to hold a news conference talking about that non-citizen police officer from Hanover Park. So that's something else that we'll hear about a little bit later on today and bring you some of those comments tomorrow here with Illinois in Focus. You've also got, as we mentioned, the Supreme Court with the order list. We'll see if the Viramontes case is on there. Also happening today, you've got a U.S. House hearing on the Veteran Administration electronic health record modernization efforts. And actually, Congressman Mike Bost from Illinois is the chair of that committee, so we'll see what he has to say. Plus, you've got President Donald Trump. He's going to be participating in a border defense medal presentation. Plus, he's going to be holding some Christmas receptions as well in and around the White House. So that's a little bit of what's going to be covered today by the team here at the Center Square. So be sure to get to the Center Square and stay up to date with the headlines, but wake up with us here each and every weekday morning for more of Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you so much for being part of the program, especially the live program, and be sure to share it up with your friends, family, and whoever you think needs to know what's going on in Illinois. All right? It is only with the Center Square. Illinois legalizes physician-assisted suicide as critics warn of moral and safety risks. That is just one headline you'll see at thecentersquare.com. Governor J.B. Pritzker announcing this on Friday, that he signed Senate Bill 1950, and that's got strong backlash from a variety of areas, from the medical field to the religious field and those who support individuals with disabilities. What are the implications here from this? It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning for Illinois in Focus Daily, but get the headlines in your inbox at thecentersquare.com. So this measure, Senate Bill 1950, it started out as a bill concerning food sanitation when it was filed earlier this year in 2025. Ultimately, throughout the House process, after it had passed the Senate, the House amended the bill, making it a end-of-life options bill for terminally ill patients. And that ultimately was brought up in spring session, where they had some debate, and Democrats who supported it stood up and shared some personal stories from some of their constituents, and even went further. State Representative Maurice West, Democrat from Rockford, also a man of faith. He's a pastor. He talked about what this bill means to him on the floor back in May at the end of spring session. Here is State Representative Maurice West.
The bill, you must have a sound mind. Any doubt from a medical professional that you do not have a sound mind, then you do not qualify. Let the record reflect. I'm a public official who represents a great many of people with many religions, and I believe in the miraculous healing power of Jesus Christ. I truly believe that cancer is a killer, but God is a healer. I've personally witnessed Miss Nylene from my church receive a terminal diagnosis of 6 months in '98, and she lived until 2021. I've heard testimonies similar to that throughout my life. After my illness, I value life even the more. Life is sacred, but death is sacred too. The sanctity of life includes the sanctity of death. This bill allows, if one chooses by themselves, for someone with a terminal diagnosis to have a dignified death. A decision between the patient, their physician, and their God. It is not our decision as government officials to get in the way of that.
So West making an impassioned plea there to support the measure, saying that government shouldn't get in the middle of that end-of-life decision. But some of the safeguards that we'll hear about when the Senate brought it up months later deal with who has access to that medicine when it's prescribed by a physician. And ultimately, what's going to happen with just the overall ethics of medicine. A doctor in the State House, Dr. Bill Howder, a state representative from Morton, he stood up in opposition of the measure in May.
We're giving insurance companies another tactic to pressure patients. The cheapest care is no care. In closing, don't undermine the relationship physicians have with their patients. Don't give insurance companies another tactic, another tool to pressure patients, to pressure the disabled, the poor, the terminally ill, with no care, with death. I ask the members of this Illinois House, don't pass this bill. Vote no, or don't vote at all. It's the first time a physician will recommend you go out and take a smoke break. This is...
Please bring your remarks to a close.
Thank you. This bill irrevocably changes the principles, the purposes, and the practice of medicine in Illinois. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So the measure passed in May, and passed with very small margin of the majority. Some in the Democrats the caucus didn't support it. Republicans resoundingly opposed it, and it passed in May. Again, a bill that started as a food sanitation bill out of the Senate passed the Senate, but then in the House was gutted and replaced with a physician-assisted suicide measure, and then ultimately passed the House. Never got brought up in the Senate back in the spring session. But then for fall veto session in October, everybody's watching for the transit bill. Everybody's watching for the energy bill. Everybody's watching for the migrant sanctuary bill. As these measures were being passed back and forth between the House and the Senate, early Halloween morning in overtime, because they were only scheduled to be in on the 30th, but they went well into the Halloween morning hours, October 31st. We were told, hey, the Senate's going to bring up the end-of-life options bill, and it seemed to kind of come out of nowhere for people that were watching at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then we get State Senator Linda Holmes, who supported the measure, talking about the various provisions.
This is the bill. This is medical aid in dying. As you know, we've been talking about this for the past couple of years. I'm going to keep this brief so that I can take the time we have here to answer your questions. But we've had pretty extensive hearings on this prior to us in committee, and we had a committee in Chicago, so a lot of this has been covered. But very, very simply, this allows a person age 18 or older who receives a diagnosis of 6 months or less to live and is mentally competent to make an informed decision to have the option of self-administering a prescription to end their suffering.
And there's a lot of different checks and guardrails that supporters say are in place. You have to have 2 doctors, you have to be of sound mind, and a variety of other guardrails. State Representative Jill Tracy, a Republican from Quincy, stood up in opposition of this and said that it's not going to add to the state's ability to take care of those with disabilities. She said that it's just not a good path forward. State Representative Chris Balkema from Shanahan, a Republican, he also stood up in opposition and talked about the guardrails that other states may have on this, but they're now, with the laws that they have in place for doctor-assisted suicide or end-of-life options, they're removing those guardrails.
Anybody can travel to Oregon now to take their life when they so choose. California, New Mexico, Canada to the north of us, every state and country that has enacted this has opened the guardrails over time and made it easier and easier to take one's life. The impact on Illinois' most vulnerable, the 1.5 million people with disabilities, is huge. At the end of the day, if you have a disability, mentally or physically, the question is introduced into your mind, do I want to keep going or do I want to take my life? And you need to have 2 doctors sign off. You given the medication, you take the medication home and you decide when to take it. The problem is anybody else can get a hold of the medication as well. There's no guardrail along that right now in the bill. You're given the bill, you're given the medicine, you take it home, and there's no follow-up or requirement by the state. So that's tremendous pressure on people psychologically, mentally walking forward. My wife is a chaplain in a hospital. She's seen many people come off of hospice. Many people have come off of hospice, and in this situation, it's one more opportunity for that person to decide, yep, I've got my 2 doctor's signatures, I'm going to go ahead and take my life. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not right to introduce a culture of death into Illinois. We have never had this before. We've never had a situation where we are giving people an option to choose their life. We all, and 59 of us in this room, are compassionate, we care, and we want to preserve life the best as possible. This is going in the wrong direction.
Balkema making that plea, again, early Halloween morning as the Senate seemingly, it was primed and ready to go in the Senate in May. They just didn't bring it up before they adjourned. And then at the tail end of fall veto session, the bill comes up and passes out of the Senate. And again, seemed to catch a lot of people who were monitoring the State House closely off guard that was going to be something considered during a fall veto session. But the governor putting out his statement on signing signing the bill, saying that Illinois becomes the 12th state to enact legislation to provide terminally ill patients with autonomy, dignity, and peace at the end of their lives. And again, this is from Friday with the governor announcing that. He didn't hold a bill signing ceremony. He simply just put out a news release talking about Senate Bill 1950 and how it's now law. And he says to ensure the highest safeguards for patients, the law is effective in September of 2026, which affords participating health providers and Illinois Department of Public Health significant lead time to implement stringent processes and protections as outlined in the law. Also known as Deb's Law, the bill honors Deb Robertson, a lifelong Illinois resident living with a rare terminal illness who has strong advocacy for the bill and shed light on the impacts on families and individuals struggling with terminal illness as they seek dignity and autonomy to peacefully end their lives. This comes as the governor a few weeks ago talked about how he was strongly listening to all sides of this. And he made that as well clear in his announcement of signing this. He says, I've been deeply impacted by the stories of Illinoisans or their loved ones that have suffered from a devastating terminal illness. And I've been moved by their dedication to standing up for freedom of choice at the end of life in the midst of personal heartbreak. He talks about how he hears those stories, but also talks about how it's about empathy. So the governor signing this on Friday. Again, no bill signing ceremony, just sending it out in a news release. But he also signed a whole host of other legislation as well. And another news release that he put out, he signed about, 14 bills dealing with a variety of things, including impacting the Illinois Liquor Control Act. You've got different things impacting insurance. You've got the creation of the Equality for Every Family Act. And that was actually a certification of an amendatory veto. And this deals with language and family law. Also makes improvements to the juvenile justice system. Another measure deals with the state comptroller's office. Another measure, as I said, deals with liquor control. Then you get the Senate Bill 1911, decoupling from federal bonus depreciation for newly construction, new residential real property. Replaces the global intangible low tax income tax with net controlled foreign corporate tested income, extends the excess business loss deduction for trust, extends the state and local tax deduction, amends the film production services tax credit, and creates statewide innovation, development, and economic act. Variety of other things. This is the bill that decouples from the federal tax code, essentially, and a lot of opposition there from the likes of manufacturers and businesses saying it's going to hurt business investment by making other states more competitive if they choose to not decouple from the federal tax law. So Illinois seeming to decouple from that now with legislation that the governor enacted on Friday. But a variety of other things. Again, the governor releasing this list of bills that passed during fall veto session that he is ultimately enacted. All right, so that's some of the latest from late last week happening here in Illinois. Of course, this is Illinois in Focus Daily with you each and every weekday morning. Wake up with us, but you can get the headlines in your inbox. Just go to thecentersquare.com/Illinois, and you'll be able to sign up for the newsletter. You can also find out how to donate to the Center Square. We're a nonprofit newswire service, free and open to the public, and definitely driven by your donations, so make that today. All right? It's Illinois in Focus Daily, only with the Center Square. More than a couple of hundred bills take effect January 1st, and one of them we'll highlight is the Safe Gun Storage Act. Welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning here for the Center Square. You can get the headlines in your inbox at thecentersquare.com. So one measure that we've watched really closely at the State House during spring session was the Safe Gun Storage Act. And you can go back and watch some of those segments as we aired the debates about this. And during spring session, it's ultimately passed. And the governor signed it over the summer. Well, significant provisions take effect January 1st. And what it does, we hear from U.S. Law Shield President Kirk Evans. He's also an attorney, and he discussed with me late last week what this measure ultimately does in the state of Illinois, dealing with liability, safe gun handling, who has to lock their firearms up whenever who's in their house. Here's Kirk Evans.
All right, so Illinois already had a safe gun storage statute, but the new statute makes a whole bunch of changes to that. So we can go sort of one by one through those. So under the old statute, all of the penalties and criminal penalties attached if the firearm was accessible by a child under age 14, that has now been bumped up to under age 18. So it's now going to apply to additional minors. In addition, the old statute had what I call kind of a catch-all exception, which is if the firearm was stored in some otherwise inaccessible place, not known to be readily accessible by children, that has been eliminated. Now, basically, the only way you can store it is in a locked container or on your person where it cannot be accessed by the person under the age of 18. Next, sort of the big one is the statute adds two additional categories of folks who you can't allow access to firearms, and those are at-risk persons and prohibited persons. So at-risk persons are defined as folks who have either through their actions or their words indicated that they might harm themselves or others or commit suicide. Obviously, somebody who does a social media post that says they're going to kill themselves or something, that's an obvious one. But by actions that are not spelled out by words, that's very, very difficult to interpret. Going to be a tough one for the courts and for folks to figure out. And prohibited persons, so that's a prohibited person under either federal or state law from possessing firearms. So think convicted felons, serious domestic violence, things like that. Folks who are not allowed to have firearms under existing law. Can't have those folks accessing the firearms either. So with that being the new statute, they've also added some new civil penalties. It is already a crime under Illinois law. The first time this happens, it's a Class C misdemeanor, which is up to 30 days in jail and up to $1,000 fine. In addition, if it happens more than once, it's a Class A misdemeanor, which is up to a year in prison and a $2,500 fine. That's the penalty before, and that's the penalty under the new statute. But the new statute adds in some civil penalties, which is just tacked on money. If you violate the statute, but really nothing bad happens, just say somebody reports you or a neighbor, sees this or a housekeeper or something like that, it's a additional civil penalty of $500. If a child or at-risk or prohibited person gets a hold of the firearm, but nothing bad happens with it, then it's a civil penalty of $1,000. And then if a child, at-risk person, prohibited person gets a hold of the firearm and then does something terrible with it, serious bodily injury, death, something like that, the civil penalty can go up as high as $10,000. So those are all of the new changes to the Storage Act.
Pretty thorough from Kirk Evans on the measure that, again, passed in spring session, signed in the summer, and going into effect January 1st. Now, some of the criticism about the bill included the issue of, well, how are people at a business or at a home supposed to ultimately determine whether or not there's a prohibited person in their home? So how do you do that? Is that something that you can even possibly do? Here's Kirk Evans again talking about how people are supposed to check ID for people visiting their homes.
Oh no, it's terrible. And let's just even say the age thing. What if you got a bunch of college kids over, and you assume they're all above 18, but you have a whiz kid in the group who's 17, and he gets access to one of the firearms. You're not checking ID at the door. But you're right. The toughest part is it's if you know or reasonably should know. And how in the world are you going to know about someone's criminal history? How are you going to know if they just posted on Facebook that they're going to shoot up a school? It makes it very, very subjective and difficult for individuals to figure out.
Now, obviously, a lot more still about the safe gun storage bill from Kirk Evans here, but we're live here with Illinois in Focus Daily, and we wanted to keep an eye on what's happening with the U.S. Supreme Court and whether or not they're going to take that Cook County gun ban challenge. And just refreshing the order list here that was just released by the U.S. Supreme Court, no Veramonte's case on the order list. So looks like it's going to be relisted yet again. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as well. The Supreme Court apparently has the next couple of weeks off, so we'll have to wait until early next year to find out if they're going to take a gun ban challenge or not, and what that means for the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals case in the Barnett challenge, where you have a lower court, the Southern District of Illinois, declaring the law unconstitutional, but plaintiffs there in the state of Illinois and gun owners across the state still in limbo. And even though they have a lower court saying, hey, it's unconstitutional, the appeals court has yet to rule on this. We'll see where that goes. Just wanted to take a brief moment to update you on that here live, as we do each and every weekday morning with Illinois in Focus. Go live. All right, but back to the safe gun storage bill. Kirk Evans talks about a variety of other components of this, and in particular, the liability component here. Another point of criticism that opponents of the bill had, saying that essentially this bill is going to open people up to who are victims of a theft, possibly being charged with some kind of liability if the person who stole their firearm uses it in a crime.
Probably not for that civil penalty. So the general law is if somebody, commits a crime to get your gun and then commits a crime with the gun, technically you are not supposed to be civilly liable for that if you're sued by the injured person. But I think under that new statute, the state is going to be able to get that civil penalty from you. I will say there is one more issue when it comes to civil liability. So the new statute, and I didn't mention it, the new statute says that if you violate this statute, that is prima facie evidence in a civil case that you are liable civilly. And that's just a fancy term for, hey, if you violate the statute, you're almost automatically liable in a civil case. It can be rebutted, but you're essentially presumed to be liable in a civil context if they violate the statute.
Another major criticism that opponents of the safe gun storage law had when they passed this back in May was this takes away the ability for somebody to properly defend themselves in their own home if they can't have quick access to a firearm, like, for instance, your nightstand next to your bed.
You're right. Makes it very, very difficult. So one of the other exceptions is if you've got the firearm on your person. So I know a lot of people are gun nuts out there, but I don't know anybody that sleeps with the firearm, in their holster while they're sleeping or taking a nap. So if it's not on your person, then you have to have it locked up and securely locked up. And unless you got one of those really fancy ones, that you can get to in the dark without screwing up, you're going to have a difficult time quickly accessing that firearm.
Evans, of course, with U.S. Law Shield, talking about some final thoughts on this measure as it's going to go into effect, at least portions of it, come January 1st.
That's just the tough one. And combined with, so this is combined with the existing failure to report statute. And then there are new modifications to the failure to report statute. So the difficult part comes when, okay, I'm a victim of a crime, my firearm was stolen. Everybody wants to report when their house has been broken into. But what if you have that question mark, oh my gosh, did I have that gun stored properly? What if I didn't have, it was on the table and I've got kids, and so I report this to the police. I want them to investigate the robbery, but basically you're implicating yourself in a crime merely by reporting your stolen firearm.
Thanks to Kirk Evans for chatting with me about that late last week, and glad to bring it to you here with Illinois in Focus. If you like what you see each and every weekday morning, be sure to subscribe. Get notifications by hitting the bell, and share this with your friends, with your social circles, with your family, if they're interested in what's going on here in Illinois. And get them to the Center Square to sign up for that newsletter as well. Free headlines in your inbox. What's going on in Illinois, what's going on around the country, in Washington, D.C. and beyond. And I will tell you, we got big things coming here for the Center Square, so be sure to stay tuned. All right, it's right here with the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, and it's Illinois in Focus Daily. obviously, a lot of attention is going to be paid to what happened in Australia with a mass shooting and also what happened at a university here in the United States. Plus, you've got crime in Chicago and a variety of different elements that are at play across the country, from immigration enforcement and public safety. And who knows what the federal government's going to do with spending bills and the Affordable Care Act subsidies. This week's going to be a pretty busy week. Plus, we've got the city of Chicago that doesn't have a budget yet, and they've got to have something in by the end of the month. Is this going to be a slow holiday news season, or are we going to have to go pedal to the metal all throughout, right? So be sure to stay with us here with Illinois in Focus Daily. And I got to tell you, big things coming. I don't know when I can tell you about them, but some big things coming. So looking forward to sharing those details with you as well here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, only with The Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com, get this podcast wherever you get podcasts. But wake up with us live here with Illinois in Focus and The Center Square.
Call